Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the Azad, Jammu, and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. What is it, exactly? How does it all work? And maybe most importantly, who's really calling the shots? Let's dive in and figure it out.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basics, then break down the assembly by the numbers. After that, we'll look at the key leadership roles, touch on a bit of history, and wrap it all up with the main things you should remember.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What even is the AJK Legislative Assembly? Well, at its very core, it's the engine room of governance for the entire region. Let's see what that really means.
Now you're going to hear this term unicameral legislature. It sounds complicated, but it's not. All it means is that there's just one single house or chamber. That's it. So every debate, every vote, every single law gets decided in this one room in Muzaffarabad.
So who actually gets to be in that room? To really get a feel for how this place works, you've got to understand the numbers that bring it to life.
The magic number here is 53. That's the total number of seats in the assembly, but how those 53 seats get filled, well, that's where things get really interesting.
See, those 53 seats are not all created equal. They're split into two very different buckets. You've got 45 general seats that are filled through direct elections, but then you have these other 8 seats that are reserved, specifically to make sure certain voices don't get drowned out.
And this is a fascinating part of the structure. Those 8 spots are specifically carved out. 5 for women, 1 for Islamic scholars or ulama, another for a technocrat, an expert in their field, and 1 for citizens who live overseas. It's basically diversity built right into the system. So this setup creates this really cool mixed electoral system. For those 45 general seats, it's a straightforward race, what's called first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Simple. But for those 8 reserved seats, it's a whole different ballgame. Proportional representation. Here, parties get seats based on your overall share of the vote. So you've got 2 different rule books for one assembly. And what does that all lead to? Well, right now, it leads to a very, very tight balance of power. The government has a 29-seat coalition, which is just barely a majority. But with the opposition breathing down their necks with 24 seats, you can bet that every vote, every debate is a high-stakes affair. That slim margin is where all the political drama lives.
Okay, so we've got the structure, we've got the numbers, but any assembly is really about the people inside it. So who are the ones actually steering the ship?
Whenever the assembly is in session, there are a handful of people whose job it is to make sure the whole thing doesn't fall apart. They're the ones guiding the debates, setting the agenda, and leading the charge for their parties.
And these key roles will probably sound pretty familiar. You've got the speaker, who acts as the impartial referee. Then you've got the prime minister, who's like the captain of the government's team. Of course, you need a captain for the other team, too. That's the leader of the opposition. And finally, the deputy speaker, who's always ready to step in as the backup ref.
Now, a complex institution like this doesn't just spring up overnight. To really get it, we need to take a quick look back at the key moments that shaped the assembly into what it is today. And through all its history, one core idea has been the anchor: the 5-year election cycle. Right from the start, the system was built on adult franchise, that powerful, simple concept of one person, one vote. If you look at the timeline, you can see some really crucial moments. It all kicked off in 1971. Then, just a few years later in 74, you get the interim constitution. That's the legal DNA that the assembly still runs on today. 1985 was another big year, getting regular elections back on track after some bumps in the road. And that brings us all the way to the 11th Assembly, which is the one in session right now.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground. The structure, the people, the history. So let's boil it all down. What are the absolute essentials you need to remember about the AJK Legislative Assembly? If you only take 4 things away from this, make it these. 1. It's a single-chamber legislature in Muzaffarabad. 2. It's got 53 members, with that special split of general and reserved seats. 3. It uses that hybrid voting system. And 4, the whole operation is guided by the interim constitution from back in 1974.
So we'll leave you with a final question to think about. We've looked at all the rules, the roles, and the numbers on paper. But how does this specific design, with its reserved seats and its mixed voting systems, actually translate to the real world? How does it shape the daily lives of the very people it represents? Because at the end of the day, that's the question that really matters.